The Texas sun hung low, gold and forgiving, over the open fields that surrounded Willow Creek. The little white chapel looked like something out of a storybook, lace curtains fluttering in the wind, rose petals scattered on the path, and a hum of soft country music drifting from inside. Inside, every pew was filled. People had come from all over town to see Evan Matthews, Willow Creek's favorite firefighter. Married a woman everyone said had changed him. Evan stood near the altar, his hands trembling slightly against his suit. He wasn't the nervous type, at least not until today. His best man, Cole, nudged him lightly. "She's not running," Cole whispered. "You're the one who looks like you might." Evan chuckled under his breath, but his eyes stayed fixed on the double doors. "I've never felt like this," he murmured. "Like I could lose everything before it even starts." Then the music changed. The doors opened. Lila Harper appeared, bathed in the glow of sunlight, streaming through the stained glass. Her dress shimmered like frost, her hair pinned up with delicate silver pins. She looked fragile and fierce all at once, and as she stepped forward, every sound in the room seemed to fade. Even Evan forgot to breathe. Narration carried the weight of that moment. Two people trying to leave their old lives behind. For Evan, it was a clean slate after years of loss and guilt following his father's death in a fire he couldn't prevent. For Lila, it was something quieter, a desperate attempt at belonging, at being seen not as the woman she used to be, but as the one she was trying to become. When she reached the altar, Evan took her hands. For a moment, her smile faltered, so faintly no one but him noticed. Her pulse fluttered beneath his touch. "You okay?" he whispered. She nodded quickly, just nervous. But her eyes said something else, something heavier. The ceremony unfolded flawlessly, or so it seemed. The pastor's words were soft and measured, the kind of verses that lingered in the air like prayer. "Love bears all things, believes all things," he said. Lila blinked back a tear. Evan squeezed her hand tighter. The audience smiled and sighed, swept up in the beauty of it all. When they exchanged rings, a faint tremor passed through Lila's fingers. The band slipped once before settling in place. The crowd laughed gently, mistaking her trembling for emotion. Only Lila knew it was fear. Outside, after the vows, the guests gathered around them. Laughter, champagne, the scent of summer roses. The photographer's voice rose above the chatter. "All right, big smiles. One more for the newlyweds." Evan wrapped an arm around Lila's waist, kissing her cheek as the camera clicked. She leaned in, her expression soft and grateful, but her gaze drifted, just for a second, to something behind the lens. Her body stiffened, and Evan felt it. "What is it?" he asked quietly. "Nothing," she said too quickly. "Just thought I saw someone." The photographer called for the family next. The moment passed, swallowed by the rhythm of celebration. But as they walked toward the reception hall, a rustic barn strung with fairy lights and laughter, Lila's eyes kept flicking back toward the tree line beyond the chapel. In the distance, a black car sat idling on the dirt road, the driver barely visible behind tinted glass. Later, when guests would look back, they remember how radiant the bride was, how happy the groom looked. But a few would also recall the unease, that fleeting moment when Lila's smile didn't quite reach her eyes, and Evan seemed to sense it too. By sunset, the sky turned the color of copper and smoke. The music from the barn echoed faintly across the hills, laughter rising, glasses clinking. No one could have guessed that by midnight, the fairy tale would unravel, that the man everyone adored would vanish into the Texas night, and the woman who wore white would be left standing alone in the glow of her perfect day. The reception was already in full swing when the sun dipped below the hills. Fairy lights draped across the old barn flickered against the twilight, casting everything in a soft, honey glow. Laughter, clinking glasses, and country music filled the air, the kind of sound that made even the loneliest souls feel part of something. Lila sat beside Evan at the head table, smiling on cue as toasts were made in their honor. Her champagne glass trembled in her hand, though she hid it well. The image of the black car outside the chapel still lingered in her mind, a ghost refusing to fade. Every time a door creaked or someone passed too close, she felt her pulse quicken. Evan leaned in, his voice low, warm. "You okay?" Lila nodded, forcing a laugh. Just overwhelmed, I guess. He kissed her temple, brushing a stray curl from her face. You did it, Mrs. Matthews, he said softly. You made it. But beneath his gentle smile, Evan sensed something had shifted. The woman he married that afternoon seemed distant. Her eyes darted off into the entrance, as if waiting for someone. Then, the moment the air changed, the barn doors creaked open. A hush rippled through the guests nearest the door. A woman in a pale gray dress stepped inside, her face half shadowed by the brim of her hat. She didn't belong. Her posture was too rigid, her expression too knowing. She didn't move toward the crowd. She simply stood there, watching. Lila's laughter faltered. The champagne flute slipped slightly from her fingers, catching light as it tipped. She froze. Evan noticed instantly. "Who is that?" he whispered. Lila didn't answer. Her lips parted, her eyes widening with something between recognition and terror. The woman began to walk forward, heels tapping against the wooden floor. Guests turned to watch, whispers spreading like wildfire. The band slowed, uncertain, the cheerful melody stuttering to silence. The stranger reached into her clutch purse and pulled out a small, sealed envelope. The photographer, caught mid-shot, lowered his camera. You could have heard a pin drop. The woman stopped in front of the bridal table, setting the envelope gently on the white tablecloth. Her gaze locked on Lila. "Congratulations," she said. Her voice was calm, almost kind. Then she turned and walked away. No one moved for several seconds. Evan reached for the envelope, but Lila snatched it first. Her hands shook as she stared at her name scrawled across the front. Lila Reese. Evan frowned. Reese? Who? But she was already rising, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. She whispered something he couldn't catch and hurried toward the restroom at the back of the barn. The envelope clutched to her chest. Cole gave Evan a confused look. What the hell was that about? Evan didn't answer. He followed her. Narration slowed, heavy and cinematic. The barn lights glowing behind him. Guests murmuring. 100 eyes watching as the groom disappeared into a narrow hallway after his bride. Inside the restroom, muffled sobs echoed. The camera of the mind lingered on the closed door, on Evan's silhouette pausing outside it. He knocked once, softly. "Lila? Talk to me. What's going on?" No response. Only the sound of paper tearing. "Lila?" he said again, firmer this time. The door opened. Only a crack. Enough for him to see her eyes, red and wild. She pressed something into his hand. A photograph. "I can explain," she whispered. But before he could ask anything, she pushed the door closed again. Evan looked down at the photo. It showed Lila, younger, bruised, standing beside a man with his arm around her. The caption below read, "Missing Daniel Reese, last seen with fiancée Lila Harper." When he looked up again, the hallway was empty. The restroom door swung open. She was gone. Panic set in. He ran outside, scanning the barn, the field, the road beyond. But Lila had vanished into the dark Texas night. Guests began to murmur, confusion turning to unease. The music never started again. By the time the sheriff's deputy arrived, there was only one thing missing from the perfect wedding: the groom himself. The laughter and music that had filled the barn only an hour earlier now felt like echoes from another lifetime. The night air over Willow Creek turned cold, sharp with unease. The guests lingered in small clusters near their cars, whispering about what they just witnessed. The strange woman, the letter, the bride who fled, and now, the missing groom. By the time Deputy Rachel Boone pulled up to the venue, flashing red and blue lights washed over the gravel lot. Rachel was 41, practical, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She'd been on duty long enough to know that when something fell off at a wedding, it was usually more than cold feet. She stepped out her patrol car, the dust crunching beneath her boots, and took in the scene. Fairy lights flickering in the distance, half-empty champagne flutes abandoned on tables, and a crowd too afraid to leave but too tense to stay. "Who called it in?" she asked one of the servers standing near the barn door. "His best man, Cole," the young man replied, pointing toward a tall, anxious figure pacing near the head table. "Said the groom's been missing over an hour. Bride, too, for a bit, but she came back. Kinda." Rachel frowned and followed the direction he pointed. Inside the barn, Lila sat alone at the now-empty bridal table, her makeup streaked, her hands clasped around a napkin as if it were a lifeline. Her wedding dress looked ghostly under the dim yellow lights. She didn't look up when Rachel approached. "Mrs. Matthews?" Rachel said gently. Lila's eyes lifted slowly, hollow, red-rimmed, and vacant. "He's gone," she whispered. "Evan's gone." Rachel crouched beside her. "When did you see him last?" Lila blinked, struggling to recall. "After the letter. I went to the restroom. He came after me. I gave him something, a photo, and then... When I came out, he was gone." Rachel noticed how Lila's voice cracked, not just with grief, but with guilt. "You said there was a letter?" Lila nodded toward the table. A torn envelope lay there, the handwriting jagged and deliberate. Rachel carefully picked it up. Inside was a single newspaper clipping, old, yellowed at the edges. "Arizona man still missing. Fiancé denies involvement." Below the headline was a photo of a younger Lila, smiling beside a man whose arm was draped around her shoulders. The same image Evan had supposedly seen before he vanished. Rachel's expression hardened. "You didn't mention this when we first talked." "I didn't think it mattered anymore," Lila said quietly. "That was another life." Outside, a deputy found Evan's phone near the parking lot. Screen cracked, still recording a short, flickering video. Rachel hit play. The footage showed Evan walking toward his truck, breath unsteady, muttering to himself. His voice trembled. If it's true, if she really was part of it, I need to know. Then the camera jerked violently, the view spinning toward darkness, and the video ended. Rachel replayed it twice before pocketing the phone. Something wasn't right. The timestamp showed it was recorded barely 20 minutes after the reception ended. "Get a bolo out on Evan Matthews," she told her deputy. "Truck's a silver Ford F-150, plate 9JH, 232. Start with the back roads. If he was upset, he might have gone off route." The deputy nodded and hurried off. Hours passed. The guests were sent home. The fairy lights dimmed to silence. Only Rachel, her team, and a handful of locals remained at the scene. At 2 a.m., a call came through the radio. A vehicle matching Evan's truck had been spotted 15 miles out, parked on the shoulder of County Road 22, doors unlocked, headlights still on. Rachel drove out herself. The road was empty except for the chirring of crickets and the faint rush of wind over dry grass. Evan's truck stood there like a ghost in the dark, engine cold. The driver's door hung open, swaying slightly. Inside, Rachel found his phone charger, his jacket, and his wedding ring sitting neatly on the passenger seat. She stared at the ring for a long moment before picking it up. People who ran didn't leave behind something like that. Then she noticed something else. Faint footprints in the dirt beside the truck, leading toward the tree line and vanishing into the dark field beyond. Rachel followed a few steps, her flashlight beam sweeping across the ground. The soil was dry, hard-packed, but the tracks were deep, uneven. Whoever walked that way had been dragging their feet or being dragged. She felt the hair on the back of her neck rise. The stillness was too heavy, the night too quiet. Rachel turned toward her deputy. "Mark this off. We're not dealing with a runaway." As dawn crept over the horizon, the Texas sky turned from black to bruised purple. The only sign of Evan was the imprint of his boots in the dirt and a faint smell of river water on the wind. Rachel looked out toward the horizon, her jaw tightening. "Find out who sent that letter," she murmured. Behind her, in the faint glow of sunrise, Lila stood at the edge of the road in her torn wedding dress, barefoot, staring toward the same horizon. She didn't cry. She just whispered one line, almost to herself. He shouldn't have gone looking for him. Rachel turned sharply. "For who?" But Lila didn't answer. The morning after Evan's disappearance began in silence, the kind that felt too heavy for a town so small. The news spread faster than wildfire through Willow Creek. The perfect wedding had turned into a mystery overnight. By sunrise, every porch in town was buzzing with the same question. What happened to the groom? Deputy Rachel Boone sat at her cluttered desk inside the sheriff's station, staring at the evidence laid out before her. The torn envelope, the yellowed clipping, and the grainy photo of a younger Lila with her arm around a man identified as Daniel Reese. His smile was tight, possessive. His hand on her shoulder looked more like a claim than affection. Rachel rubbed her temples. Something about that photo wouldn't leave her alone. The timestamp on the newspaper article was from 5 years ago, out of Flagstaff, Arizona. The headline claimed Daniel had vanished without a trace after a heated argument with his fiancée, Lila Harper. She'd told police at the time that he'd left her after a fight and never came back, but his family never believed her. Now, 5 years later, she'd changed her name, and the past had found her. Rachel's partner, Deputy Miles, entered with 2 styrofoam cups of coffee. "You look like you've been up all night," he said, setting one beside her. "I have," Rachel replied, eyes still on the photo. "The letter's the key. Someone wanted to ruin her wedding, not just scare her. Whoever sent it knew exactly who she was and what she'd done." Miles took a seat. "You think she killed him?" Rachel shrugged. "If she did, she's the best liar I've ever seen. But it's the timing that's off. The letter arrives during the reception, and hours later, her new husband disappears. That's not coincidence." She opened the evidence bag and carefully slid out the envelope again. Inside, folded between the clipping and the photo, was something she hadn't noticed the night before, a faint watermark, a hotel name, the Silver Spur Inn, Amarillo. Rachel leaned forward. "That's 2 hours north. Let's see who checked in under the name Reese." By noon, Rachel and Miles were on the road. The Texas highway stretched endlessly ahead, lined with dust and forgotten billboards. Lila sat in the back seat, silent, still wearing traces of her ruined makeup. Her fingers twisted the hem of her sleeve. Rachel spoke softly, breaking the silence. "You want to tell me anything before we get there?" Lila's voice came out barely audible. "I didn't kill Daniel." "I didn't say you did," Rachel said. Lila stared out the window. "He was cruel, controlling. When I left him, I thought he'd come after me. I moved, changed my name, everything. I thought I was free." She paused, swallowing hard. "But if he's alive, if he sent that letter..." Rachel turned slightly in her seat. "You think Daniel's still out there?" Lila nodded. "And if Evan found him, he's in danger." The Silver Spur Inn was a rundown motel on the edge of Amarillo, its sign flickering weakly in the afternoon heat. The owner, an older woman with cigarette-stained fingers, confirmed that someone using the name D. Reese had checked in 2 nights before the wedding, paid in cash, didn't leave a forwarding address. Rachel asked to see the room. Inside, the air was stale, the bed unmade, the blinds drawn. On the dresser, Rachel found a small notebook. Most of the pages were blank, except for one torn-out corner with a message scrawled in shaky handwriting. S.H. She doesn't get to live happily ever after. Rachel exchanged a look with Miles. "So he is alive," he said quietly. "Or someone wants her to believe he is," Rachel replied. She took one last look around the room. On the nightstand sat a half-burned candle, wedding white. The wax melted down over a photograph of Lila in her bridal gown, printed from the town's online paper the day before the wedding. Rachel's stomach twisted. Whoever had stayed here had been watching her, waiting for that day, that evening, back in Willow Creek. Rachel sat alone in her office again, flipping through her notes. The pattern was clear now. Someone had planned this for months. The letter wasn't random. It was an invitation to chaos. As she closed the file, her phone buzzed. It was Miles, his voice tense. "Rachel, you'd better come down to the station. We just pulled a call from a fisherman on the Trinity River." Rachel stood instantly. What did he find? A pause. Then Evan's truck keys and a blood-stained ribbon. Looks like the one from the bride bouquet. Rachel grabbed her coat, heart pounding. The case had just shifted from missing person to something darker. The interrogation room was quiet, except for the hum of the fluorescent light overhead. Lila sat at the metal table, fingers clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Her once perfect wedding hair now hung in limp curls, and the dress she refused to change out was wrinkled, the hem stained from the muddy road near the river. Deputy Rachel Boone entered with a file under her arm and 2 cups of coffee. She slid one across the table toward Lila. "You look like you could use it," she said softly. Lila didn't move. "Did you find him?" Rachel shook her head. "Not yet, but we found his keys and something that might have belonged to you." Lila's eyes flickered up. "The ribbon?" "Yes." Rachel sat down opposite her. "We also found a motel where someone named Daniel Reese checked in before the wedding. That name ring a bell?" For a long moment, Lila said nothing. Then she exhaled, a slow, trembling release, as if the weight she'd carried for years was finally too heavy to hide. "It's time I tell you everything." Rachel leaned back, letting the recorder on the table capture every word. Lila's voice was fragile at first, but grew steadier with each sentence. "I met Daniel 6 years ago in Flagstaff. He was charming at first. Smart, funny, always saying the right thing. I thought I'd found someone who would never hurt me. But that's how men like him are, isn't it? They make you feel chosen before they make you feel trapped." She looked down, twisting her ring finger where a new band should have been. "At first it was little things. He didn't like the way I dressed or who I talked to. Then it was the yelling, the slamming doors, the nights I'd wake up to find him going through my phone. By the time I realized what he was, it was too late. He had control of everything, my money, my car, even my name." Rachel's pen scratched quietly across her notepad. "And the night he disappeared?" Lila's eyes darkened. "We fought. He'd accused me of cheating. I told him I was leaving. He laughed, said I'd never make it out alive. He grabbed me by the arm. I hit him with a lamp. He fell. There was blood, but he was still breathing." She paused, her voice breaking. "I ran. I didn't look back." "You never reported it," Rachel said. "I thought he'd come after me if I did," Lila whispered. "So I left town, changed my name, and started over in Texas. I thought he was dead, until that letter showed up." Rachel studied her closely. "You really believe Daniel's alive?" Lila met her gaze. "I don't just believe it. I felt him there that night. When that woman came into the reception, I knew she wasn't alone." Rachel frowned. "You think Daniel sent her?" Lila hesitated, then nodded. "She's a sister. Mara Reese. I remember her voice. She called me once, months after I ran. Told me I'd ruined everything. Said she'd find me one day." The air in the room seemed to thicken. Rachel leaned forward. If Mara was there and Daniel's alive, then they both had a reason to hurt Evan. Lila's eyes welled up. "He didn't deserve this. He knew about my past. At least most of it. But he forgave me. He said we could start over. That's why I married him. I thought I was safe." She buried her face in her hands, sobbing quietly. Rachel gave her a moment, then spoke, her voice firm but not unkind. "If Daniel's alive, he's playing a long game, and Evan might be a pawn in it. But we're going to find him. I need every detail about Daniel. What he looked like, what scared him, anyone he used to contact." Lila nodded weakly. "There's one more thing," she whispered. "Before I left Arizona, I saw him with someone. A man he owed money to. Dangerous. Daniel was always in trouble. Gambling, debts, bad deals. I don't know his name, but..." She trailed off, eyes distant. "If Daniel's back, he's not alone." Rachel closed her notebook, the gravity of it sinking in. This wasn't just about jealousy or revenge. It was something bigger. As she stood to leave, Lila called out softly, "Deputy Boone?" Rachel turned. "If you find him, please don't tell me first. I don't want to hear it in his voice." Rachel paused at the door, the weight of the confession pressing heavy on her shoulders. Outside the window, storm clouds gathered over the horizon, thunder rolling in the distance. Her phone buzzed on her hip. It was Miles. "Rachel," his voice crackled through. "You need to get down here. Search team found something by the riverbank." "What is it?" she asked. There was a pause. "You'd better see it yourself." Rachel glanced back at Lila, who was staring blankly at the wall, and knew that whatever they found next would either prove Lila's story or destroy it. The storm had been rumbling on the horizon finally broke as Deputy Rachel Boone pulled up beside the riverbank. The flashing red and blue lights of patrol cars painted the wet gravel in streaks of color. She stepped out, rain pelted her shoulders, and pulled her jacket tighter around her. The air smelled of wet earth and something faintly metallic, the scent of truth buried just beneath the surface. Miles waved her over from where the search team had gathered. "You'll want to see this," he said grimly. Rachel followed him down the muddy embankment, careful not to slip. The river was swollen, rushing and brown, churning with the runoff of last night's rain. Just beyond a line of yellow tape, a deputy crouched near a patch of disturbed soil. "Here," Miles said, pointing. Footprints. At least 2 sets, one male, one female, headed toward the river. The woman's print stopped about 10 feet in. Rachel squatted down, her flashlight beam sweeping over the impressions in the mud. The man's tracks were deep and uneven, suggesting he'd been carrying weight or struggling. The woman's were lighter, smaller, barefoot. "She wasn't running," Rachel murmured. "Look at the stride, steady, deliberate, almost like she knew where she was going." Miles frowned, or like she was being led. Rachel straightened, looking toward the water where the prints vanished. The current was too strong for anyone to swim across, and yet there was no sign of anyone returning. No body, no torn fabric, no discarded shoe. Just the river swallowing every trace. "Did we find anything else?" she asked. Miles nodded to a nearby evidence bag hanging from a deputy's hand. Inside, caked in mud and streaked with red, was a torn piece of lace, the same kind from a wedding dress. Rachel's stomach turned. "It's hers." He hesitated. "You sure?" "She's still wearing that dress," Rachel said. "But look at the edge. It's been ripped clean, not cut, like someone grabbed her." The rain fell harder now, washing away the top layer of mud, and with it, the fragile impressions of the footprints. Rachel crouched lower, her gaze tracing the last visible outline before it disappeared. "There's more to this," she said quietly. This wasn't random. Whoever did this wanted it to look like she followed him into the river. Miles exchanged a look with her. Or maybe she did. Rachel shook her head. "Lila said Daniel's alive, that he sent someone after her. If that's true, then this," she gestured to the vanishing prints, "is a message." They stood in silence for a long moment, the sound of rain and the rushing water, the only witnesses to what had happened here. Then a voice called out from further down the bank. "Deputy, we got something else." Rachel and Miles hurried over. 2 officers were kneeling beside a pile of driftwood and tangled reeds that had caught on a branch. One of them lifted a small object wrapped in a clear bag. It was a ring, gold, engraved with the initials E+L. Rachel's breath caught. "Evan and Lila." The deputy handed her the bag, found it snagged on a root about 20 feet downstream. Rachel turned it over in her hand, noting the faint smear of blood on the band. "This didn't just fall off," she said. "Someone took it off." Miles crossed his arms. "You think Evan's dead?" Rachel stared at the river again, her reflection flickering in the dark current. "I think someone wants us to think that." A low rumble of thunder rolled across the sky. Rachel pocketed the evidence bag and took one last look at the water before turning back toward the vehicles. "Get the divers out here at first light," she ordered. "And Miles, keep Lila under watch. If Daniel Reese is really alive, he's not done yet." As she climbed the hill, the mud sucking at her boots, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that the footprints hadn't just been left behind. They'd been placed. And somewhere beyond the rain and the river's roar, a pair of eyes watched her from the trees, silent, patient, and waiting for her to follow the trail a little too far. By morning, the storm had thinned to a drizzle, leaving the air heavy and cold. Deputy Rachel Boone hadn't slept. The ring sat on her desk under a harsh fluorescent light, sealed in its evidence bag. E+L. The engraving looked almost tender, mocking her now. She replayed last night's scene in her mind. The footprints, the torn lace, the ring washed downstream. Too many pieces, none fitting cleanly. Lila's claims about a man named Daniel Reese still echoed her ears. A dead man sending threats. A husband gone without a trace. She was reviewing Lila's police interview for the 3rd time when the office door opened. Sheriff Holt stepped in, his hat dripping with rain. "We got company," he said flatly. Rachel frowned. Who? He didn't answer. Instead, he gestured toward the window. Through the glass, Rachel saw a man standing beside a black pickup truck parked just outside the station. Tall, soaked to the bone, his hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets. At first glance, he looked ordinary. But when he turned toward the door, something about his face made Rachel's pulse skip. Not recognition exactly, but familiarity. Name's Daniel Reese, Holt said quietly. He says he's here to talk about Lila Harper. Rachel stood slowly, disbelief tightening her throat. That's impossible. Lila said he died 5 years ago. Holt nodded grimly. Guess someone forgot to tell him that. Inside the interrogation room, Daniel sat across from Rachel, his damp hair slicked back, a faint scar cutting across his jaw. His voice was low, even too even. "You've been looking for me," he said. Rachel leaned back in her chair. "We've been looking for a missing groom. His bride claims her ex, you threatened her, but that's hard to confirm when the ex is supposed to be dead." He smiled faintly. Supposed to be. Rachel didn't like the calm in his eyes. The kind people wore when they had nothing left to lose. "Where have you been?" she asked. "Away," Daniel said simply. "Long enough to start over, until she dragged me back." Lila. He said her name like it burned. "She's not what you think she is, deputy. She's been lying since the day I met her. Lying to me, lying to you, lying to him." Rachel crossed her arms. "And what lies are we talking about?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "Ask her about what happened in Austin. About the man who disappeared before me. About the money." Rachel felt the air shift. "You have proof." He leaned forward. "Proof? No, but she does. She always keeps souvenirs." Before Rachel could press further, Holt stepped into the room, motioning her out. In the hallway, he spoke low. "Rachel, a call just came in. The security camera at the wedding venue. It picked up movement last night, around midnight. Someone was near the back entrance." "Someone?" Holt nodded. "Could be our missing groom." Rachel's heart kicked hard against her ribs. "Show me." The footage was grainy, but clear enough to raise the hairs on her neck. A tall figure, drenched, moving with a limp. He staggered across the courtyard and paused by the barn doors, the same spot Evan had been seen last before disappearing. Then, for a moment, the figure turned toward the camera. Rachel froze. It was Evan, or at least, it looked like him. She leaned closer. The timestamp blinked 2:17 a.m. His eyes, dark and wide, seemed to be looking through the camera, not at it. Then he turned and vanished into the tree line. When the clip ended, the room fell silent. Holt rubbed a hand over his jaw. If that's Evan, he's not dead. Rachel glanced toward the glass window where Daniel Reese sat waiting, calm and silent. Or he's not alone. Later that night, Rachel drove to the safe house where Lila had been staying. The lights were off, the curtains drawn. She knocked once. No answer. Then twice. Still nothing. She reached for her weapon and pushed the door open. The room was empty, except for the faint smell of cologne and wet footprints trailing across the floor. At the kitchen table lay a note, written in Lila's trembling handwriting. "He's back. Not Daniel. The other one." Rachel's blood ran cold. She looked up, the silence pressing in around her. Outside, in the reflection of the rain-streaked window, she caught a glimpse of movement, a figure standing by the fence, watching. When she turned, he was gone. The rain had stopped by dawn, but the sky remained heavy and gray, as if it hadn't decided whether to let go or hold back. The Brazos River looked almost motionless at first glance, calm, quiet, but underneath, the current churned like something alive. Deputy Rachel Boone stood on the riverbank, the same spot where Evans and Lila's footprints had last been seen. The mud had hardened overnight, locking faint impressions beneath a crust of dust. She stared at the water, thinking of the note Lila had left. "He's back. Not Daniel. The other one." The words hadn't left her since she read them. They clung to her mind like burrs. Miles approached, a thermos in hand, his boots crunching over the dried dirt. "No new tracks," he said. "But the dive team found something." Rachel turned sharply. What? He handed her a clear evidence bag. Inside was a fragment of dark fabric, a torn piece of suit material, still damp and tangled with river weeds. It was caught on a branch about 30 feet downstream. Miles said, "Looks like it could have come from a tuxedo." Rachel turned the bag in her hands, her stomach twisting. Evan had been wearing a black suit the night he vanished. "He's still in there," Miles murmured, his gaze on the river. If the current didn't carry him off, the mud did. Rachel didn't answer. She crouched low, tracing a finger near the hardened footprints. "No," she said softly. "If he was dragged in, we'd see scuff marks. If he fell, we'd see a collapse point. But look, both sets of prints end clean, side by side. You think they went in together?" She nodded slowly. "Or whoever was here wanted us to think they did." By mid-morning, they'd set up a mobile station near the bank. Drones hovered overhead, scanning the murky water. The divers reported nothing. No body, no debris, no sign of struggle. It was as if the river itself had swallowed the evidence whole. Rachel rubbed her temples, exhaustion gnawing at her. The case had stopped feeling like a disappearance and started feeling like something colder, a pattern. She looked toward the horizon, the jagged line of mesquite trees cutting into the pale sky. That was where the stranger had stood the night before, watching the house where Lila had been hiding, watching her. "Maybe he's playing with us," Miles muttered beside her. "Whoever he is, Daniel, Evan, or some third ghost, he's always one step ahead." Rachel stared at the river's surface, the way it rippled faintly in the wind. "Ghosts don't leave footprints," she said. "Someone alive is doing this." An hour later, one of the divers radioed in. His voice was crackled and breathless through the speaker. "Sheriff, we've got something, not a body, but you'll want to see this." Rachel and Miles hurried to the river edge as the diver waded out, holding a small mud-streaked box. He placed it carefully on the tarp. Rachel crouched beside it, heart pounding. The box was metallic, sealed with rusted hinges. She pried it open with a gloved hand. Inside were waterlogged photographs, faded, warped, but still visible. She lifted one carefully. It was Lila, smiling, years younger, standing beside a man who wasn't Evan or Daniel. Rachel flipped to another. Same man, same smile. But in this one, Lila's eyes were red from crying. Behind them, in the blurry background, a faint outline of the Willow Creek Chapel could be seen, the same place where she'd just been married. Miles exhaled slowly. "That's here. These were taken before she ever met Evan." Rachel's pulse quickened. "And whoever this man is, he's part of whatever she's running from." At the bottom of the box, she found something else, a silver key wrapped in a strip of soaked paper. She unfolded it carefully. Scrawled in smeared ink were 4 words: "The river keeps secrets." Rachel's throat tightened. "He's taunting her," she whispered. "And us." Miles frowned. Who would go through this much trouble? Rachel looked up, eyes fixed on the dark stretch of trees across the river. The shadows shifted, wind moving to the branches like whispers. "Someone who knows her," she said quietly. "Someone who's been here before." A chill wind swept across the water, carrying the faintest echo of movement, like footsteps crunching through brush. Rachel turned sharply, her hand on her holster. Nothing, just the river, restless again. But as they packed up to leave, the drone camera caught something new, a reflection beneath the surface. A pale shape, motionless, tangled in the reeds. Rachel's radio crackled. "Deputy Boone, we've got a body." She didn't move for a moment, just stared at the water as the wind howled through the trees. "Pull it out," she said finally. "Let's see who the river kept." The air inside the moor was sharp and cold, too clean, too still. Rachel Boone stood over the stainless steel table, staring at the body they'd pulled from the reeds. Every flicker of the fluorescent light made the pale skin look almost translucent. It wasn't Evan Matthews. The corpse was male, early 30s, athletic build. A faint scar curved along his left shoulder, and a tattoo of a compass on his wrist. Rachel recognized it from the photos she'd found in the metal box. The unknown man wasn't unknown anymore. He was the one who had stood beside Lila in those old pictures. The pathologist looked up from her notes. Name's Aaron Kells. According to the prints we ran. Former contractor out of Austin. Went missing 5 years ago. Rachel's pulse quickened. 5 years. That's when Daniel Reese disappeared, too. The pathologist nodded grimly. Except Aaron's been in that river a while. Months, maybe longer. Someone didn't want him found. Rachel exhaled slowly, stepping back. Someone like Lila Harper. When Rachel entered the interrogation room that evening, Lila was already there. The pale yellow light cast long shadows across her face. She looked smaller than before, hair damp, hands folded tightly in her lap. "I heard they found someone," Lila said quietly. Her voice trembled, though her eyes didn't lift. "Who was it?" Rachel didn't answer right away. She set the photograph, the one of Lila and Aaron by the chapel, on the table between them. "You tell me," Rachel said. Lila's breath hitched. "Where did you get that?" "From a metal box in the river, along with a key and a note that said, 'The river keeps secrets.'" Rachel leaned closer. "You knew him, didn't you?" Lila's shoulders shook. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she nodded, barely. "Yes, Aaron. He was my fiancé before Daniel. Before everything." Rachel sat down, her voice steady but sharp. "And before Evan." Lila's silence was answer enough. "Start talking," Rachel said. "Now." Lila's voice came out thin, trembling like glass about to crack. "I met Aaron in Austin," she began. "He worked construction. I was a barista then, barely making rent. He was kind, patient, the kind of man who made you believe you could be someone better. For a while, we were happy." Her eyes unfocused, drifting somewhere far away. Then Daniel came into the picture. He was Aaron's client. Charming, successful, too curious for his own good. He started showing up at our house, helping with projects, asking questions about me. Rachel frowned. Questions like, what? "About my past," Lila whispered. "About where I'd lived before, who I'd been before." I told him to stop, but he wouldn't. Aaron thought Daniel was just jealous, until one night, Aaron didn't come home. Rachel felt her chest tighten. "You think Daniel killed him?" Lila nodded weakly. "I found blood in the garage. His tools were gone. Daniel told me Aaron left town after an argument. He even helped me file the missing persons report." "And you believe him?" Lila's eyes filled with tears. "I wanted to, because by then, I was already in love with Daniel." The silence that followed felt like it might choke the air itself. Rachel didn't move. "What happened next?" Lila swallowed hard. "Daniel changed. Controlling. Violent. When I tried to leave, he said he'd send Aaron back if I did. I ran that night and never looked back. Changed my name. I thought he'd killed Aaron. But now," she broke off, her voice cracking. "If they just found his body, it means Daniel lied. He didn't kill him right away. He kept him somewhere. He wanted me to think he was gone so I'd stay." Rachel watched her, the weight of every word sinking deep. "And you think Daniel's the one following you now? The one at the wedding?" Lila met her eyes for the first time. "No," she whispered. "It's not him." Rachel frowned. "Then who?" Lila's hands trembled as she slid something across the table. A torn scrap of paper. On it, written in shaky handwriting, was a single sentence. "He wears his face now." Rachel felt the chill crawl up her spine. "Evan," she breathed. Lila's voice broke. "He's not Evan anymore. Whatever Daniel started, it didn't end with me." The lights above flickered once, the hum of the fluorescent bulbs buzzing like static. Outside the room, thunder rumbled again in the distance. Rachel stood slowly, her heart pounding. She glanced toward the darkened hallway beyond the glass, and for a split second, she thought she saw a shadow move. "Stay here," she said, reaching for her holster. "Lock the door." She stepped out, gun drawn, scanning the dim corridor. The lights flickered again, and just as she turned the corner, she saw it. Muddy footprints leading straight through the back door, dripping water across the floor. The river had sent something back. The night pressed down heavy, the air thick with the scent of wet soil and rust. Rachel Boone's boots splashed through shallow puddles as she followed the trail of muddy footprints leading away from the station. Her flashlight beam cut through the mist, trembling slightly with her heartbeat. The prints led her toward the old bridge, the same one that stretched over Brazos, 100 yards from where they'd found Aaron Kell's body. The river whispered beneath it, restless and low, carrying secrets that refused to stay buried. "Dispatch, this is Boone," she said into her radio. "I've got fresh tracks heading north along the riverbank. Looks recent and human." Static answered her for a moment before a voice broke through. "Copy that, Boone. Need backup?" She hesitated. The sound of water rushing below felt almost like a voice. "Negative," she said finally. "I'll check it out first." The flashlight beam caught something near the base of the bridge, a flash of white fabric tangled in the reeds. Rachel's chest tightened. She moved closer, crouching low, and saw it was lace, torn, mud-streaked, the same lace that had matched Lila's wedding dress. Rachel's pulse kicked up hard. She scanned the area, the beam sliding across the wet stones until it caught something else, a shape half hidden under the bridge's support beam. Pale, motionless. For a moment, the sound of her own breathing drowned everything else. Then she stepped forward, her hand on her holster. "Evan," she called softly. No answer. She crept closer. The figure was face down, one arm bent awkwardly beneath the body, the other stretched toward the water as if reaching for something. Rachel swallowed, crouched, and turned him over. Her stomach dropped. The face was Evan Matthews, or what was left of him. His skin was gray and cold, eyes half open, lips bluish. But something about him looked wrong. His suit was the same one from the wedding, though torn and soaked, and his left cheek had a faint line, a surgical scar, fresh and deliberate. Rachel staggered back. "Oh, God!" Then she noticed a rope, a thick, frayed line tied around his wrist, leading upward toward the underside of the bridge, as if someone had anchored him there deliberately. The realization hit her hard. Evan hadn't drifted here. He'd been placed. Her radio crackled again. "Boone, report. You still got eyes on those tracks?" She raised the mic, her voice shaking. "I've got a body. Repeat, a body under the bridge. It's Evan Matthews." Silence. Then, "On our way." Rachel knelt again, forcing herself to look closer. There was something tucked into Evan's breast pocket, a folded scrap of paper sealed in plastic, protected from the water. She hesitated, then pulled it free. The handwriting was smeared but legible. He wasn't supposed to find her. Rachel stared at the words, her breath fogging in the cold. "Find who?" she whispered. Behind her, a sound broke the silence. A splash, faint but deliberate, from the river below. She spun, flashlight sweeping across the dark water. For a second, she thought she saw movement, a figure half submerged, watching her from beneath the bridge. But when she aimed the light again, the water was empty. Rachel's chest tightened. She backed away from the edge, her heart thundering. Above her, the bridge groaned in the wind, the sound low and mournful, like something alive. Then her radio crackled one last time. Only this time, it wasn't dispatch. The voice was soft, distorted, and unmistakably male. He wasn't the only one looking deputy. Rachel froze. "Who is this?" Silence. Then, faintly, through the static, checked the bride's veil. Her flashlight trembled in her hand. She turned toward the patch of reeds where the torn lace had caught earlier. The fabric fluttered gently in the wind, and beneath it, barely visible, something metallic gleamed in the mud. She crouched, brushed away the dirt, and uncovered a small key, not like the one found in the river box. This one was newer, polished, marked with the initials D. R. Daniel Reese. Rachel stood slowly, the sound of the river rising again, a deep, hungry whisper beneath the bridge. Whatever game this was, it wasn't over. Someone was pulling the strings, and Evan was only the first to fall. As she turned back toward the flashing red and blue lights approaching from the road, the water behind her rippled, and something else surfaced briefly before vanishing again. A second rope, a second shape, and this time the fabric clinging to it wasn't black. It was white. The sirens had long faded into the distance, leaving only the whisper of the river and the creaking of the bridge above. Deputy Rachel Boone stood motionless at the edge of the embankment, staring at the rippling water where the second shape had disappeared moments earlier. The cold bit into her skin, but she didn't move. The air carried that same metallic tang she'd tasted when they pulled Evan's body from beneath the bridge. Blood and rust, grief and rot. The paramedics had taken Evan away an hour ago, leaving behind muddy footprints and unanswered questions. The small key marked D, R, still lay heavy in her pocket, its edges biting against her fingers. Daniel Reese. The name churned in her thoughts like debris caught in the current. Rachel. A voice called from behind her. Sheriff Harlan Graves approached slowly, his flashlight beam cutting through the mist. You need to get some rest. You've been out here too long. She turned toward him, her face pale beneath the flickering light. You didn't see it, Harlan. There was another body. I saw the veil. It was white, just like the one Lila wore. The sheriff exhaled, his breath fogging. We dragged the river. Boone. Nothing came up. Rachel's voice was tight. Maybe you didn't drag deep enough. Harlan's expression softened. You're seeing ghosts. You've been chasing this case for too long. But Rachel shook her head. No, I saw her. Or someone who wanted me to think I did. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the small key, holding it up to the flashlight beam. This was buried under the veil. D. R. Daniel Reese. He's connected to this. Somehow. The sheriff frowned. Reese was Evan's lawyer. He handled the trust after the wedding got called off. Why? That's why I'm going to find out, she said quietly. By morning, Rachel was sitting inside the county records office, the hum of fluorescent lights filling the silence. She scrolled through property deeds and legal filings, eyes narrowing when she found Reese's name attached to an old transfer document, one tied to the Harper family estate. A second name appeared beside his, Aaron Kells. Rachel froze. The same Aaron Kells whose body had been found near the bridge 2 weeks ago. The same man Evan had supposedly argued with before he vanished. What the hell were you two doing together? She whispered. Then, another document loaded. One dated only 3 months before the wedding. A contract. Hidden within legal jargon was a chilling clause. In the event of either party's death, the property shall revert to beneficiary L.H. L.H. Lila Harper. Rachel sat back, her pulse thudding. Everything had been tied together. The land, the deaths, the lies. And Lila had been the constant thread in all of it. She didn't even notice the man watching her from across the hallway until she gathered her files. A tall figure in a dark coat, his eyes shadowed beneath the brim of his hat. He lingered for only a moment, then turned and disappeared into the rain. Rachel hurried after him. But when she reached the door, the street was empty. Only the faint reflection of her own face stared back in the glass. That evening, she drove toward the Harper property, the headlights carving through the fog. The mansion loomed ahead like a skeleton in the dark, hollow, wind-battered, its windows glowing faintly as though it were breathing. Rachel's boots crunched on the gravel as she approached the front porch. The door was ajar, creaking softly with each gust of wind. Inside, the air smelled of dust and lilies. Candles burned low in the parlor, their wax pooled around silver holders. On the table sat an open photo album, wedding pictures, faded and torn. In one of them, Lila smiled beneath her veil. Evan stood beside her, holding her hand. But behind them, half obscured in the background, stood another man, face turned slightly toward the camera, wearing a ring identical to Evan's. Daniel Reese. Rachel's stomach twisted. She turned the page and found something taped to the next, a handwritten note, smeared but still legible. The vow was never meant for him. A sound came from upstairs, the soft creak of a floorboard. Rachel drew her weapon, heart pounding. Lila. No answer. She ascended the staircase slowly, the light from her flashlight flickering against the peeling wallpaper. At the end of the hall, a door stood open, the faint glow of a candle spilling through. She pushed it wider and froze. A wedding gown hung from the ceiling beam, suspended by a thin rope. Below it, a framed photograph rested on a chair, a wedding portrait. Except Evan's face had been cut out, replaced by Daniel Reese's. The candle guttered, and for an instant, Rachel thought she saw a reflection move behind her, a figure in white, standing in the corner of the mirror. When she turned, there was nothing, only the faint echo of a whisper. "Till death do us part." Her flashlight sputtered once, then died completely. And in the dark, the sound of footsteps began descending the stairs.